fees. We need a transformative shift to break this tide. We need early and preventive action. We need to develop solutions that put people first, where young children, girls, women, youth are not seen as vulnerable populations, but as agents of change who will create strong, just, and harmonious societies. And it is with great excitement that we come here today to share a potentially transformative solution that can be the accelerator for peace. I am talking about early childhood development. Science is changing the way we are thinking about the earliest years of life. We're in the midst of a revolutionary shift about what we know about brain development and its foundation, not only for lifelong health, learning, and productivity, but also for bringing change in societies. We know the first years of life, a child's brain develops at an unprecedented rate. Brain cells, neurons, form almost 700 to 1,000 connections a second. And I guarantee you there's no Twitter feed that can achieve that rate. It is just phenomenal. We know that genes only provide the blueprint for the brain. It's the experience that sculpts it. When children receive nurturing care, protection, stimulation, love, the potential for the complexity and the exuberance of the brain to develop is unfathomable. But there are also negative experiences. There is also chronic stress, violence, living in conditions of adversity that creates toxicity that can derail the brain. Children need positive experiences to grow. Nutrition feeds the brain. Stimulation sparks the connections, and protection buffers it from toxic stress. And it is this early childhood period that lasts a lifetime and the foundation of who we ultimately become. So what is the relationship between early childhood and peace? And why is there this global buzz? Hundreds of people have come to Amman to discuss this. Why? And I will give you 5 reasons today why. The first, we know that care and nurturance in these first years of life builds a foundation for a child's ability to trust, to form relationships with others. The neurobiology of peace tells us that in early attachment, the release of hormones like oxytocin starts to form the ability to form good, positive relationships. Second, early learning programs, community-based programs, parenting programs from India to Chile have been so successful in promoting young children's pro-social behaviors, emotional regulation, executive functioning skills, the skills we need to succeed in a 21st century economy with the complex communications and relationships. Third, we know early childhood interventions are linked with the reduction of violence at home, between parents and children, in spousal relationships. Jordan has led the Better Parenting program and has so eloquently demonstrated this change. We know that when youth are engaged in providing services for young children, we start to see a change in their behavior. There's beautiful evidence from Uganda, from child soldiers who've become caregivers in child centers. And the poignancy with which you watch them sing and play with children and transform is incredible. Fourth, early childhood programs serve as a platform for community cohesion. We were so struck this morning at the Makani Center when we saw communities come in together, learning social harmony, learning cohesiveness. We see this in Ivory Coast, we see this in Turkey, we see this around the world, this platform that early childhood provides where everybody cares for their children to come together to start to build harmonious societies. And finally, the 5th reason is early childhood interventions contribute to social justice by reducing inequality. From Jamaica to the United States, we have seen a phenomenal return on investment, almost 1 to 7, for every intervention in the early childhood period. because income starts to equalize. We start to close the inequality gap. And it is because of reasons like this, for the first time in global development, early childhood has been recognized in the goals for 2030. The Sustainable Development Agenda recognizes the important role of early childhood development. UNICEF and partners have come together to create the Early Childhood Peace Consortium with this vision of preventing violence and promoting peace through the transformative power of early childhood development. This practice was recognized in a UN resolution as an innovative practice, a new solution to bring to the world to accelerate the vision we want. And we have brought all this experience and knowledge to Jordan. Why to Jordan? Because Jordan has been the leader for early childhood development. Because Jordan has recognized the importance of youth in bringing change, in transforming conflict, in preventing and countering violence, and sustaining peace. Jordan has championed the two windows of life, early childhood and adolescence, when we can make the difference we want to see. There is so much at stake. How are we going to promote this transformative solution? The evidence is credible, the moral argument irrefutable, the sustainable development momentum behind us, and the power to act is in our hands. Are we going to take up this call and make it our own to bring lasting and sustainable peace in the world? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. It's now my privilege to ask Professor Mohammed Abu Nimir, who's the Senior Advisor at the International Center for Interreligion and Intercultural Dialogue and Professor of Peace and Conflict Resolution at the American University. Thank you. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, honorable guests and colleagues, greeting of peace to all of you. Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor for me to have this chance and opportunity to share a few insights regarding my work. I've been doing this work of education for peace and pluralism over 30 years in many conflict zone areas as well. I'll follow my co-chair pattern in terms of emphasizing the need and the importance for early childhood development to be linked systematically with peace and pluralism. And especially education for social cohesion, and the link has to be obvious, considering the challenges and considering the obstacle that's facing us in the region. My comments will be on the region rather than globally, and also I'll end with a few promising examples so we are not all frightened from the reality that we're all facing, to give few samples of hope. There are a number of regional trends that affect early childhood development and the need for education for social cohesion and the pluralism, especially inter-community dialogue. Makani is an area for a space for dialogue that's missing from many, many places in our Arab region and in the region in general. One trend is that our environment, our children's environment, saturated with violence and destruction. The child doesn't need much to see and observe this type of destruction. Whether this destruction and mass atrocities or violence done by formal militia, formal military forces or militia or random armed group, regardless, the child at the end of the day exposed to too much of violence in their daily life. Second trend, we have a public, visible, and unfortunately aggressive discourse against diversity and pluralism. In the name of religion and other ideologies, children are exposed to public discourse that calls for elimination of differences and rejecting and intolerating identity expression that do not align with my own identity of religion, sectarian, ethnic, tribal, national, whatever it is. Whatever is not aligned with me, I have a justification not to tolerate. The third trend has to do with regional discourse of exclusion and polarization that is manifested in certain public media and social outlets, including educational curriculum that calls for exclusion, and even some call for religious purity or ethnic purity. These things documented in our region, and those are formally recognized. This all three trends taking place in a disaster place where, as my colleague mentioned, there is a massive infrastructure shortage in responding to the basic needs of children: security, health, economic, and education. So just imagine if you live in this reality and then you have those three trends with you. Such reality makes the need for linking early childhood development agency with values of diversity and dialogue as necessary, if not even mandatory, to be more blunt in this. In our region, societies, for it to break the cycle of violence and sectarianism that has torn apart the region's social fabric, ethnic and religious fabric, children in early age need to be systematically exposed to values of accepting differences as part of their natural environment and not as an exception. It needs to be done on a daily basis. In my work with elementary schools and other areas, I saw the norm of revenge and using direct violence to assert the student right, the child right, as a norm, unfortunately. We conducted 620 surveys with Arab teachers in Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Egypt, and Iraq. And we asked them about their views on reconciliation and forgiveness. Unfortunately, 92% of these Arab teachers that we interviewed expressed their need for skills to reduce the practice of social violence in their schools. They said, we do not have skills, we do not have opportunities to do that. We believe in it, yet we don't know how to do it. Also, in none of these social educational system, we found a designated formal education class or session to teach reconciliation and forgiveness. How do we expect to transit from a war into a peace in our societies if we do not invest in reconciliation and forgiveness in early childhood and in elementary schools? We do not have that in general. We have indeed over 15 million refugees of women and children in the region. We can no longer deny that what we're facing is violence and sectarian polarization as a disease with an epidemic consequences. We no longer can deny that. How do we develop immunization for this? The immunization, what we're proposing here is when we introduce methods and tactics to prevent further escalation of violence and further deterioration and destruction. I just want to say that this is not an Arab problem. And we're not here because it's an Arab problem. We're here because this problem exists, but it's also, we work in Sri Lanka, in Mindanao, in South Asia, in the US, in Europe. These manifestations also exist in the society. So just to remove this notion that this is a specific or unique to this region in that sense. How can we link? We're all talking about the link of early childhood development with culture of peace and social cohesion. Awareness, one is really to do awareness for human relationship based on solidarity and compassion on intra and interpersonal relation. Second, to relate to everything in the child context, not only educate for peace and justice and ethnicity, but in ecology, in gender, in religion, on a class issue. We have 5 sets of foundational skills that are missing in many of our educational system. Dialogue skills as a primary tool to handle differences. Planting seeds for critical thinking and not educating for obedience without the capacity to understand why I am obeying somebody. And for that, we need the skills to sort out the massive information that is flooding our children. Massive information with no critical examination of that. Individual responsibility for dealing with mistakes rather than blaming the others for my own problem. Fourth is to learn to peacefully initiate to solve your own problem rather than rely on the elders to do that. Those are basic foundation skills for the culture of peace and for culture of dialogue. Few examples of success that we've done in my time out. I will try to manipulate that. One has to do with the meeting we done in Istanbul last year in June with 45 members of a network on early childhood network for peace, and I think it's an important initiative. Second, in Kaisid, we've managed to bring over 22 muftis and patriarchs and religious leaders to Vienna and to Beirut, and they all committed to allow us to work with their interreligious education institutes, and we are working on interreligious education in theological seminary and Kulliyat Sharia colleges. A third example, in Amman in September last year, we brought 124 youth in how to use social media for a simple message of dialogue and accepting the other, and they all initiated 10 public campaigns to do that. Finally, we have produced a manual of 40 hours on teaching forgiveness and reconciliation in Arabic for the first time. It doesn't exist for Arab teachers, and we began piloting that. However, we still operate outside of the formal education system in the informal education setting, and we hope that this curriculum, this manual, can be adopted and become a standard mandatory for every teacher to know how to teach for social reconciliation and peace. We are all